Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. A while ago we looked at Nazarick's defense policies and how Nazarick defended itself back in the days of Yggdrasil. Thanks to overwhelming support and many requests regarding a part 3 and the 8th floor specifically, that is what we'll be doing today. To briefly recap, in the first 5 floors we saw a singular strong unit to deter small invasion forces. This was so that if they fell, not too much was lost. Only a floor guardian and a few familiars such as Shoutier's vampire brides. On floors 6 and 7, we see the floor's defences be less about the floor guardians themselves, but all the resources a floor has to offer, and using everything to its maximum to prevent invaders making it any further. This can be seen throughout the various traps Aura has placed around the 6th floor, as well as all the minions that she has at her disposal. The fact that the area guardian Gurren resides on the 7th floor to further support Demiurge solidifies this idea further. Furthermore, as all these resources would be expensive to replace, we are now looking at a more aggressive approach, trying to crush any further advances while minimizing further losses. The two different approaches we have seen so far also act as a good way to force the invaders to show the various skills, spells and talents they have at their disposal, as the same tactic is unlikely to work against a lone Shoutier and Aura's mini army. So what about the 8th floor? The 8th floor is split in its approach. On one hand, it has the largest number of NPCs so far, and some of the strongest beings in the tomb at its disposal. On the other, the moment that 8th floor is breached is the moment the guild has to really start preparing to personally engage, as not much lies between the 8th floor and the throne room itself. This gives the 8th floor the identity of an ultimate showdown, where the tomb gives everything it has left to defeat the invasion, and at the same time buys time for the Supreme Ones to log on and prepare to personally intervene. To give an idea of this floor's strength, when 1500 players invaded Nazarick back in the days of Yggdrasil, only 300 perished on its way to the 8th floor, but none made it past. It is noted that the floor guardian played an essential role in this encounter. So to get an understanding for how the 8th floor achieved this, let's start with this unique floor guardian, Victim. Victim is the only floor guardian below level 100 and sits at a mere 35 levels. The reason for this is implied in his name. It's because he's designed to die. Victim may not be strong when he's alive, but upon death he releases a series of devastating debuffs in a wide area of effect. These debuffs include fixing in place, blind, silence, stop, panic, confusion, and magic drain, to name but a few. One of these debuffs would have caused issues, but all of them at once could be crippling. On top of this, Aureole Omega, who we'll come back to later, can control the teleportation network of the tomb, and therefore place the main combative force of the 8th floor near key, strong players or healers to swiftly take them out in the confusion and substantially weaken the invading force. Victim's lower level also acts as a great boon, as it means his resurrection cost will be substantially lower than that of Shoutier's at the cost of 5 million Yggdrasil coins. This allows Victim to serve his purpose cheaply many times over. Returning to the combative strength of the 8th floor, a number of NPCs and mercenary monsters reside here, all above level 90, with some even reaching level 100. That said, the core of floor 8's offensive power comes from Rubedo and the 8th floor hierarchy. Rubedo is said to be the strongest NPC in Nazarick, and is the sister of Nigredo and Albedo. While all three were created by the alchemy-obsessed Tabula Smaragdina, the sisters Nigredo, Albedo and Rubedo derive their names from alchemy and means the black phase, white phase and red phase respectively, with Rubedo being described as the most refined. Rubedo was created in a different way to her sisters though, with her creation being described as booting Rubedo was successful, hinting at her being mechanical in nature. It is widely believed that Rubedo is powered by the world-class item the Caloric Stone. Being powered by a world-class item explains why she is so strong, and in fact her strength is enough for Rubedo to be stronger than the world champion Lord Touchme. The difference between their power is similar to the difference in strength between Shoutier and Lord Ainz. Furthermore, the only beings considered strong enough to keep her in check are the 8th floor hierarchy themselves, with Ainz considering giving them world-class items so they can effectively carry out this role. The need for the world-class items is most likely to protect the hierarchy from the effects of the caloric stone rather than increase their own power. So, who are the 8th floor hierarchy? While we don't actually know who they are, The hint towards their identity may lie in the terrain of the 8th floor. The 8th floor is a wasteland with no construction, and as such it is believed that the 8th floor is actually the original domain of 4 raid bosses, with Nazarick built around it. That would make the 8th floor hierarchy the raid bosses themselves, with each raid boss being above level 100 and taking 6 players at least to take them on individually, let alone together. While they aren't among the strongest raid bosses like the 7 deadly sins, they are still far from weak and a massive threat to intruders. This theory also solves a mystery from the 1500 player invasion. The players who suffered at the hands of the 8th floor ended up complaining to the devs that the guild had cheated and were calling for the guild of Ainz Ooal Gown to be punished. Having raid bosses in your base would be considered cheating, as raid bosses cannot be controlled or moved, but as Nazarick was built around the boss's original domain, and the bosses were just defending said domain as intended, this wouldn't be considered cheating. This also explains why the players felt like cheating was involved, but the devs ended up confirming no cheating had taken place. The power wielded by the 8th floor hierarchy, and even Rubedo, only gets more impressive when we consider the potential for them to be buffed by Aureole Omega. Speaking of Aureole, let's look at her as well as the Pleaides 6 Stars and 7 Sisters. The 2 different naming conventions relates to who is leading the core 6 Sisters of the Pleiades. Both groups consist of Yuri Alpha, Lupusregina Beta, Naberal Gamma, Shizu Delta, Solution Epsilon, and Entoma, Vasilissa, Zeta. They go by the name the Pleaides 6 Stars when the core 6 units are being led by Sebas, and the Pleiades 7 Sisters when the youngest of the Pleiades is in charge, that being Aureole Omega. Sebas and Aureole are both level 100, unlike the rest of the sisters who range from 46 to 63. Sebas provides mainly offensive support as a frontline fighter, being that his strength is akin to that of Albedo and Cocytus, while exceeding them in his true draconic form. Aureole Omega, however, specializes in commander-type classes and provides a far more supportive role by buffing the members of the Pleiades. This buff is significant to the point where a doppelganger of the level 46 Shizu was able to prevent the level 100 Lord Ainz from casting Maximize Magic twice, while remaining hidden the whole time. This is despite the original Shizu being 54 levels below that of Lord Ainz, and therefore the doppelganger would have an even greater level difference to overcome. Bear in mind this is under a level system where levels give exponential gains, and a 10 level gap is said to be impossible to overcome. Furthermore, Ainz has damage nullification to any physical attacks under level 60, so even the actual Shizu can't normally damage Lord Ainz, let alone a greater doppelganger version. Hence it becomes clear quite how significant Aureole's buff truly is. While Victim's debuffs have likely worn off by now, Aureole's buff alone makes the level disparity between the Pleiades and any invading forces far less significant. When not leading the Pleiades, Aureole is the area guardian of the Cherry Blossom Sanctuary on the 8th floor. Although she commands the Pleiades, she is forbidden by Lord Ainz from leaving the sanctuary, and fittingly wears a Miko ensemble. As for Aureole's personal strength, little is actually known outside of her being an immortal human. When Ainz leaves Nazarick, Aureole is given the real staff of Ainz Ooal Gown to protect, although it's hard to tell if this is for her strength or the fact that she is the only person who can teleport within Nazarick without a ring of Ainz Ooal Gown. As she can control the teleportation network, this also means she can teleport NPCs to her in an emergency, as well as send invaders anywhere in the tomb to split up hostile groups. So if Aureole acts as the commander for the Pleiades, what role do the other 6 serve? Although Aureole and her sanctuary are on the 8th floor, the Pleiades position themselves on floor 9, just before the throne room. This is simply to fulfill the second tactic of the 8th floor, buying time for the Supreme Beings to prepare. After Rubedo and the 8th floor hierarchy had fallen, it was believed that any enemies would have no trouble wiping out the Supreme Beings themselves, let alone the Pleaides sisters. The Supreme Being's final stand was simply for Albert's role-playing fantasy, as he felt it was only fitting for the 41 of them to be the final villains, even if they couldn't compete with the strength of the 8th floor. And as such, the Pleiades was never expected to beat the remaining threat, but simply give the Supreme Beings enough time to assemble for the final stand. Regardless of this, the Pleiades have an impressively complex and well thought through team composition. Briefly put, Yuri is the leader of the sisters when neither Aureole or Sebas are around. She sits at level 51 with her speciality lying in close quarters combat. Lupusregina sits at level 59 and is the group's healer. The highest level of the 6 stars is Naberal Gamma, and she sits at level 63 and her speciality is being a magic caster. The highest tier spell we have seen her use thus far is the 7th tier spell Chain Dragon Lightning, but Fluda believes she is already capable of using 8th tier magic. Shizu acts as a range unit, but instead of using magic, she opts to shoot her foes for physical damage. Shizu has excellent eyesight, allowing her to track enemies in low visibility while concealing herself and rendering herself invisible. Solution, like her creator Hero, is also a slime, and this allows her to dissolve things which she absorbs. Solution acts as a guerrilla fighter, using her assassin class to melt into objects and re-emerge for sneak attacks. She has also been known to hide near Lupusregina to keep her sister's healer protected. And finally, we have the Entomancer, Entoma, who uses a variety of insects and talismans to deal damage, but typically takes on a more supportive role like Lupusregina. From this very swift look at the 6 stars, we see each fills a different combat role, and as a group they are more than capable of causing trouble for beings as high as level 100 when buffed. As for other NPCs such as Albedo, they aren't expressly mentioned to defend Nazarick, but would have resided post Floor 8 and helped to buy more time for the Supreme Beings providing they got involved at all. So that wraps up pretty much everything. Let me know if there's anything I've missed, and who is your favourite member of the Plaedes. If you have enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be greatly appreciated as it helps out the channel even further. And a huge thank you to Luca Valentin Fiorini, as his comment was massively helpful to the making of this video. So with all that said, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.